our concerns about their lesser export controls to China.
I see. They certainly know. They've heard those arguments made extensively by the last 3 administrations.
So what progress have they made specifically?
I would actually defer to John Feiner on where we were a year ago.
Okay.
Sure. So when it comes to the most advanced tools that are manufactured in Japan and the Netherlands and the United States, I think we're basically at a level of parity when it comes to controls. When it comes to other manufacturing tools, our allies have not yet caught up to our standard, and I think it is an appropriate area of diplomatic focus, has been for the last several administrations, try to bring them up to our standard. The concern is that if and as we reduce controls that are placed on chips, which is a sort of a U.S. Area of advantage and capability, advantage our companies by reducing those controls, they will actually draw our partners the opposite lesson, which is that they are in some way entitled to reduce the controls on their companies, not increase them, which is what we need.
And I think that's reasonable. Look, we've spent 30, 40 years trying to bring China into international order. And yet now, today, they have permanent normal trade relations status under Bill Clinton in 1997. They still have developing nation status through the UN and the World Bank, although I think they have now declared they won't use it, although I think that's a tactical. So do our export controls offset the advantages that China has through PNTR and developing nation status?
To some extent it does. To some, I think it's a little bit apples and oranges. I think those statuses you were describing go much more to China's ability to become a dominant producer. Mr. Pottinger was telling the story earlier of how they went to dominate telecommunications, for instance, and our granting of these statuses and treatment to them have let them take over so many of these areas. I think it's safe to say that if we don't have export controls, if we make the same mistake yet again of charging in and trying to addict them to our technology and giving them our tools, they will turn around and use those statuses that they have to dominate these areas as well.
Yeah, and I think that's my concern. I want to go back to, I want y'all to correct something, because we have heard, and I think there's a message out there that China is not producing military chips. They're trying to go into the domestic market. And I think that's probably a messaging campaign on theirs. Can you either verify that they are more concerned about their domestic use of chips as opposed to their military, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, because I think they intend to build military. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese strategy, well-worn playbook is capture, copy, and kill. Capture American technology and replicate it, copy it, and then kill the American industry that provided it in the first place, and then dominate. I mean, it's explicit. Their Made in China 2025 strategy, which is working out in many areas, it's a 10-year-old strategy, calls for China to have a monopoly or virtual monopoly globally in most of the important technologies of this century. I think it speaks for itself.
Just to add briefly, it's important again to remember that this is an authoritarian communist country, right? We have U.S. tech companies that may choose not to do business with the Department of Defense. The idea that DeepSeek would develop some sort of breakthrough that could be valuable to the military and then turn around and say to the Chinese Communist Party, I'm sorry, we agreed we weren't going to share this with you. It's laughable, and it shouldn't be a basis for how we structure our controls.
Yeah, and I just want to, we've had this conversation about this agreement, or this selling our chips, but we all know, and I just want to make this point before my time runs out, that we used to set a limit in Congress, and our BIS in Congress, and then NVIDIA would design a chip immediately underneath that standard. We just need to be careful we don't go back to that model as well. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
You rightly give the Trump administration, first Trump administration, I'll read from your testimony, deserves genuine credit updating U.S. assumptions and strategies to make competition the hallmark of U.S. policy toward China. In your testimony, you also state that China's leaders increasingly see AI as not just one of many technology priorities, but as the critical technology that will enable their economic and military ambitions. And I'll say it again, their economic and military ambitions. Mr. Cass, you stated, any export of advanced AI chips or chip-making equipment to China must be understood as supporting its military, either by empowering its leading AI labs or by directly providing computing power to the People's Liberation Army. For both of you, can you talk more about what dangerous PRC military capabilities could be enabled by access to the most cutting-edge U.S. chips?
Well, it's interesting, Representative. I'll read you a quote that's not from my testimony, but frankly could have been, which is that advanced AI compute is essential to the AI era, enabling both economic dynamism and novel military capabilities. Denying our foreign adversaries access to this resource, then, is a matter of both geostrategic competition and national security. And that quote is from the Trump AI Action Plan from July 2025. So I fully agree with that. I suspect, although I won't speak for them, my fellow witnesses today fully agree with that quote and believe that U.S. policy should be conducted consistently with that principle that's articulated there. In terms of what the specific dangers are of not adhering to that, we've talked about a number of them today. There have been recent disclosures, in particular in the cybersecurity domain, about very sophisticated, very advanced, and even effective AI-enabled cyber attacks that have been conducted by manipulating advanced large language models, an American advanced large language model in this case, but from a Chinese threat actor. That's one area of, I think, significant national security concern. We've talked as well about how AI can enable more sophisticated, more advanced military planning and the conduct of military operations, as well as intelligence capabilities. We've talked about the biotechnology implications, including the development potentially of novel weapons and pathogens. The list goes on. But the principle that was articulated in July 2025 by the current administration, I think, is one worth reverting to.
And what was the reason for the change? And I want to layer in the 25% fee to the United States government. What happened here?
I'm the wrong person to answer what the reason is for the change or internal considerations by this administration. On the fee that you described, again, I think they should answer how they think that is sort of broadly a beneficial thing. But what I would say is another good principle to adhere to is that that fee does nothing to mitigate the national security concerns associated with reducing the export control. So whatever other benefits are perceived, it does not diminish the concerns that I think all of us have expressed about enabling these very advanced chips to go to China. So I don't believe that paying your way out of those national security concerns is a good way to proceed.
To your point, and it won't pay your way out. It does not bypass the security concerns. And I know I have limited time, but Mr. Pottinger, Mr. Cass.
I would agree with what Mr. Feiner said. I would just add to your question about what has changed. You know, I think the public reporting has indicated that, unfortunately, members of industry that are very eager to earn money selling chips have had an outsized influence on what the policy has become, and that underscores why it is incumbent on Congress to act in the American people's interest.
Can you elaborate on the implications AI has under the control of the Chinese Communist Party on human rights issues? And what about preserving historical memory? You know, one of the things that even Google did, we actually showed it, when you did the Google search back in 2006, put in Tiananmen Square, nothing but happy pictures of people smiling and visiting the square. Nothing about the tanks, nothing about the Tiananmen Square massacre. How might that shape it?
Congressman, thanks for your decades of leadership on human rights. If we had listened to you all those years ago,
and others,
well, it would be an even worse irony. I mean, we essentially, in pursuit of trade, sacrificed our principles on human rights 3 decades ago, which has put us in this difficult position vis-a-vis China. It would be an even more egregious foul if we were to sacrifice our national security in pursuit of trade. So let's not compound the mistake we made a quarter of a century or so ago. Look, we're already seeing ways that Beijing is using AI to surveil and to repress and to manipulate public opinion. And that's not only within China, it's now increasingly on our own shores as well. TikTok is, if you like, a primitive form of AI that has already had very destructive effects on democracy and free speech in the United States. And that's because there is plenty of evidence, and this is long before OpenAI was a major thing, right? We're talking about a technology that was developed years ago. They're able to either suppress speech through the algorithm, which is or to promote speech. That's true of social media, but when it is regulated by not the United States government, where we have First Amendment protections, but in fact the algorithm is being governed in Beijing by a totalitarian dictatorship, it means we are sacrificing free speech in the United States by deferring to Beijing to decide what speech trends or is barely seen by anybody. So I think it only gets worse as the AI gets better, and that's why we don't want our AI regulated by Beijing. Beijing is going to be regulating our AI if Chinese companies are in the lead and their AI starts to become adopted heavily by much of the world, whether it's here in the United States, in Western Europe, with democratic allies, or in the parts of the world where most people actually live, in the global South, and all the places in between.
Early this year, I had the opportunity to visit China as part of the first House delegation since 2019. Got to meet the Chinese premier, did a lot of research and study ahead of time, and really appreciated the trip. I just wanted to relay a couple things that stood out with me from the trip. We had dinner one evening with a number of Western ambassadors on the trip, and the comment that stood out most to me was one of those ambassadors said, hey, you think that America is trying to decouple from China. You have to understand that at whatever speed you think you're doing that, China is working at double the speed to decouple from you. So that was a comment that stuck out. Another comment that stuck out from that trip with me is we were meeting with the country head of a leading U.S. technology firm, and I was discussing and asking comparisons between India and China in the tech space and why they wanted to be in the country, given all the intellectual property theft, given the other issues. And this Western head of this Western company said, we have to be in China because of the amount of innovation going on here in the country and what the competitive destruction that takes place in the aspects of China that are capitalist at the bottom end of their economy, the competitive destruction, that they needed to be there. So I just want to relay those two questions. One of the benefits of being, or those two comments, one of the benefits of being a freshman in Congress is you get the blessing of hearing so many people ask questions ahead of you that you don't have to go over retrod areas. But I would like to hear from both of you about data centers and the importance of data centers in the AI race. And then, as I look at China, I want us to avoid a war with China. And I think the best way to do that is prepare for war with China. So that's a prism in which, I look for things. I certainly, again, want to stress how much I want to war with China. But, China is strong but brittle. They have a lot of strengths in that innovation, the competitive bottom part of the country, certainly being a command dictatorship allows them some flexibility and speed, which we don't have. They're whipping our tail when it comes to power production. That's an us problem as much as it's a they problem. But they also have some real weaknesses that we know about in terms of their demographic challenges, their ability to attract and retain capital with their capital controls, the problems with the property sector, things that you guys have written and talked about. But their other weakness is they alienate a lot of their near neighbors, and folks aren't exactly eager to sign up for Chinese global domination. So it seems to me, which is all a long preamble to say, that it seems to me that we should really be having this AI strategy conversation with our allies, particularly the Quad. And so if you could address, expand maybe a little bit on data centers, and then if you could also address what you, if you think that we should be having this conversation with our allies, whether that's a possible conversation, because you know, folks that would have consequences from China leadership in the AI certainly will be us, but it'll be Taiwan and Japan before it's us. And I think it would be beneficial to members of Congress to think about this conversation with our allies and what might China and Taiwan like to see from us, you know, and maybe the Indians as well too. So maybe you guys could go from there.
Congressman, thanks so much. And you're absolutely right, or whoever was your dinner companion was who said, look, China is trying to decouple from us a lot faster than we are from them. That is the explicit goal of their last 5-year plan. It was make the rest of the world dependent on us, make us, China, independent of the world. The premier of China, now late premier, Li Keqiang, when we met with him in 2017, he foreshadowed this. He said, it's only a matter of time, he said, before China dominates every technology of the future, including AI, and America will sell us nothing but corn and soybeans.
Just in time, can we hear from Mr. Feiner maybe on the regional thing? And I apologize for speaking too long on my question.
Thank you, Representative. I very much appreciate you raising the issue of partners and allies as a sort of force multiplier for the United States. It is a unique American advantage in the world. There is no other country that has this network of relationships around the world that we have. Certainly China does not have that, largely because, as you indicated, they have a tendency, thankfully, to overplay their hand, behave in a coercive manner, and alienate countries that might otherwise be at least somewhat sympathetic to some of what they're trying to accomplish, which gives a big opening for the United States. The Quad, I agree with you, is a sort of foremost forum for discussing these issues. It tends to be more focused on economic issues, but it is increasingly, large part because of China's coercive behavior, been willing to take up issues of national security importance as well. And I think a very constructive area of diplomatic focus for the current administration certainly was for us, would be to enhance the Quad's focus on this exact issue at the nexus of critical and emerging technologies and national security.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit. Industry leaders are continually highlighting the accelerating advancement of AI systems in both the U.S. and China, and it's already being used on the battlefield in Ukraine. I wonder if you could comment on how you believe that China, with its advanced technology development ecosystem and disregard for human life, will implement battlefield AI.
Congressman, nice to see you. This war in Ukraine, started by Russia, decisively enabled by Beijing, is a laboratory, and human beings are the guinea pigs who are being butchered in the service of advancing on the other side, Axis power wartime capabilities. So they are experimenting with a fully autonomous lethal drones, for example, and it's this cat and mouse game. It's only getting worse, and they're acquiring combat experience on the other side. Not just Russians, but a whole division of at least of North Korean troops. There are reports from the Ukrainian government of Chinese soldiers, perhaps mercenaries, fighting there as well. At least hundreds of them. So yeah, we shouldn't think that there's some nice, neat prohibition among the Axis powers on using AI to the fullest extent possible to kill and win wars.
I'd only add, agreeing with everything Mr. Pottinger just said, that there is no doubt that in the context of what the two countries themselves describe as a no-limits partnership, the PRC and Russia, that we focus a lot on the support that China is providing to Russia in the context of that war. I am confident that support does not come for free. And one of the things that China gets back, in addition to trying to prop up really its only friend that has a geography in Europe, only significant friend, is that it is getting data from the battlefield. It's getting data on how the components that it is providing that go into Russian weapon systems are performing. It's getting data on how this new AI-enabled area of warfare is playing out in real time on the battlefield. And by the way, just as China is drawing that data, that information into its own military and learning lessons from that, we should best be doing the same, given how much work we are doing to provide help and support for Ukraine. Because as Mr. Pottinger said, this is a laboratory for modern warfare. It doesn't mean every war that comes after this is going to be the same. There are going to be significant differences, but we should be learning those lessons, and I'm confident that China is trying to learn those lessons.
Thank you. I wonder if also you could comment on recent reports. NVIDIA plans to ship up to 2 million H200 AI chips to China, with plans to ramp up production capacity for even more. At the same time, we're hearing about reports of shortages of key AI chip components and that are leading to supply constraints for chips going to U.S. customers.
Thanks, Congressman. Yes, it's actually zero sum. Many of the Blackwell chips and other chips that American companies are buying from NVIDIA use the same components, high bandwidth memory, for example, that go into the H200s that NVIDIA is preparing to sell to our adversary in China. So it's self-evident that there will be fewer chips available for American companies as a result of building more chips for China.
First of all, I would associate myself with Mr. Pottinger's comments. The limitations on key inputs to chips are relatively fixed and finite. He mentioned, I believe, high bandwidth memory. That is the most consequential one, but there are others as well. And so I think one area of appropriate oversight and scrutiny is what exactly are the trade-offs, not just at the level of the fully finished chip itself, but at the level of the inputs to chips that will limit the ability of not just American customers, by the way, but allied customers from getting this product at the expense of the Chinese getting it.
I think it's been clear that our company should be the foundation of the global AI stack, and sometimes that's in jeopardy when we put limitations on our ability to sell abroad. One of the things that I was really excited about is when the president lifted the prohibition on exporting the H200 chips from NVIDIA, realizing that it's probably not even the second, it's not first tier, it's not probably even second tier, it's mainstream type chips that can be used on multiple computers and other technologies. But if we don't sell it to China, my question to you, Mr. Pottinger, is do you think that we become replaced by Huawei and other places that can produce something similar, and then we no longer become the industry standard, we become essentially the beta instead of the VHS for those people old enough to remember?
Thanks, Congressman, for the question. The odds that Huawei is able to gain on NVIDIA increase if Huawei has access to NVIDIA chips. That's the irony of this. That's the paradox. China has already made clear that they're never going to let NVIDIA dominate the Chinese market. In fact, even though the administration has offered H200, NVIDIA is offering perhaps millions of these chips, the Chinese government has not actually said that it's going to allow all of that to be imported, specifically because they want to make sure that they are mandating the purchase of Huawei chips. So the goal, the explicit goal in Chinese policy and from the Chinese Semiconductor Industry Association is to ensure that Huawei dominates the Chinese market eventually, no matter what.
So what's interesting about that, we kind of brought this on ourselves when we limit our ability to sell abroad. Technologies that can be otherwise produced. We lose that competition, and people go like, well, we need enough chips here. Well, we don't have a shortage of chips here. We can produce limitless numbers of chips. But what we've done is now created a gap which has been filled by another company, and now we're in this predicament. And that's where we're at right now. And ironically, if you read books like Chip Wars and you see what put us ahead of everybody to begin with, is when people start copying you, they fall behind.
So as Elon Musk once said, you know, I don't even worry about my patents. I only patent my stuff because I don't want people to keep me from using my own technologies. If you're copying me, you're behind me. But that's what the free market's all about. And that's one of the things I like to point out is that we should never restrict people from our basic technologies because we will lose our industry standard as the world trendsetter. And I think we put ourselves at a real big disadvantage last administration.
I agree with you. When we're talking about free market economies, friendly rule of law, you know, law-abiding democracies, I'm in favor of not restricting, at least allowing significant access by friendly countries to that stuff. China is not a free market system. It is a totalitarian dictatorship. And so, you know, by the same, just like we wouldn't want to sell them F-35s in the interest of a free market, we should not be selling them, you know, AI that they could use to create commercial and military dominance.
Sure, and I'll point out, once again, the H-200 is not a problem in that regard, so I'm glad the administration has taken the lift off that. Mr. Feiner, the GAIN AI Act, which is no longer an issue right now, but that's the kind of stuff that worries me when we start talking about a bill that would have restricted exports to China and other countries on the false promise the United States does not have access to chips. And I'm talking about the ability to produce enough for us here domestically. Do you think it's a good thing that we got rid of that, or do you think there's another way to look at this? Because I personally think we have plenty of chips as long as we don't inhibit ourselves.
Representative, I do support, without going into one particular piece of legislation or another, increased activity by this committee, by this body, to look at the concerns that we've expressed, those of us on this panel today, about the Chinese getting access to the most advanced technology that the United States produces. So whether it's the approach that you just described in that former piece of legislation or others that I understand are under discussion, I am for taking a hard look at this from this body, because I believe that U.S. policy is most effective when the executive branch and the legislative branch are taking mutually reinforcing steps consistent with our national security. And I do have concerns that the number of chips that can be produced is finite. Maybe it meets today's demand, maybe it doesn't, but by all accounts, demand is exploding, it predicted to explode in the years ahead. And there will be some trade-off as to who gets access to this most important input into the AI race that we've been discussing.
Broadcom, $10.5 billion. Texas Instrument, $3 billion. Micron, $3.5 billion. NVIDIA, $17 billion, 13% market share. AMD, $6.2 billion, 24% market share. Qualcomm, in my district, $25.7 billion, 66%. And Intel, 29%, or $15 billion. That's the percent that these U.S. companies have in sales currently to China. Those numbers ring pretty true to you?
I'll take your word for it, sir.
Okay, so is it fair to say, no matter what we might want to do, that we have a problem here, which is we are addicted to selling to China, just as we are addicted to buying from China? Is that sort of, using the addiction word, pretty fair?
It's a better use than the fantasy that will make China addicted to our things.
Okay, and I want to follow up exactly on that point, because I think you're exactly right. China wants one of everything we have, and notwithstanding Dr. McCormick, having been a manufacturer and a patent holder, I can tell you that I have the same product but cheaper is why you do enforce your patents often, is that even if they're copying and stealing your market share and dramatically undercutting you so you never get the volume on your innovation, you never pay for your innovation. So we have twofold. Clearly, Qualcomm cannot give up 2/3 of its sales today, particularly when those sales end up in Android products around the world that, if they were substituted, would effectively mean that they'd only be selling a fraction of that, and only for the U.S. market. So I want to follow up with one concept for this committee. During the Cold War, we decoupled from the Soviet Union. Midway through the Cold War, when Henry Kissinger very rightfully so, saw an opportunity to create a wedge between China and Russia, we created an opening into China. That opening was, in fact, to deny, to a great extent, the Soviet Union that relationship where us versus them was the two of them. It's clear that they've reunited, but we have not decoupled effectively from China or Russia. Russia continues to supply a vast amount of non-AI products, mostly oil and so on. But China is both their crutch and our dependency. So is it fair to say, at the conclusion of this, that if we're going to win in AI, we have to wean ourselves off of dependency, decouple, while in fact continuing to push forward, that we have to do both if we're going to win the AI battle?
I agree with the sentiment. Yeah.
So if I could put it in the simplest terms, one that even a publicly educated kid like me would understand, we are back into a Reagan us or them time. The us is the free world, and the them is best known for China and Russia and their immediate allies. And that in an us or them world, as Ronald Reagan, when asked about what his strategy was, said, we win, they lose. Is that really where we are again? Exactly where Reagan inherited the Cold War, that we have to, in fact, win this by decoupling and by causing the rest of the free world to also decouple?
I think China is already decoupling rapidly from us, much faster than we've been able to from them.
And I'll follow up with that. If they decouple before we decouple, will they in fact have leverage with us that we cannot overcome?
That's their explicit strategy, what you just laid out.
Okay, in the 36 seconds left, if we do not provide the energy necessary to have our AI be ahead of their AI, if we do not ensure that the fabrication capability and the other technologies are invested in, do we lose that us or them advantage, one in which China then has the opportunity to deny us the ever getting back to a lead?
That is a very real and substantial risk.
Then I think, Mr. Chairman, you have made this the most important hearing, not just of the day or the week, but perhaps of this Congress, because it does give us an opportunity to understand exactly what we're dealing with. And I want to thank you for holding it and yield back.
China's premier makes the claim that China seeks the world where the world can cooperate on AI. And he even argues publicly against AI techno monopolies. But that is not true. That's not the game China's playing. For the PRC, the goal has always been AI dominance, capturing the global market and winning the race against the US. Now, PRC is using the full force of its industrial policy to make that a reality. And this matters to the defense of our nation. Just last month, Secretary Bissett said it clearly: a golden dome is meaningless if China surpasses us in artificial intelligence. Now, Guam is America's front line in the Pacific, and just 2 time zones away from Beijing. Losing the AI race has real implications for our island and for a free and safe Indo-Pacific. So we must take a 2-pronged approach, I believe, in leading the world in AI while continuing to make investments in the missile defense system. And Chairman Mast understands this threat, which is why he assembled us together and is putting forth a slate of bills to tackle this problem. And part of tackling this problem is knowing the facts of China's AI ecosystem, from its manufacturing capabilities to its foreign inputs to its AI utilization and compute capacity. Without that awareness, our policymakers are blindly tackling a Goliath in the dark. And this is why I introduced China AI Power Report Act, which Congressman Vidman to create the first ever annual assessment of China's AI power to ensure our export controls are adaptive, targeted, and maintain our technological advantage. of course, the time to act is now. And so, Mr. Pottinger, the Trump administration was the first to recognize the need for strategy on emergency technologies like quantum computing in 2018. Could you walk us through how China is leveraging its AI industry in other areas like quantum, biotechnology, and supercomputing? What does that mean for our national security, sir?
Thanks, Congressman. Xi Jinping talked about AI in his New Year's address this year. He understands that this is a fulcrum, right? This is the pivotal technology that allows all of these other technologies of the future and the near future, quantum computing, all what we're seeing with advanced materials that are being invented, new biotech. As well as military capabilities. He sees this as so important that he is pulling out all the stops. In fact, while he's been leader, China has now spent more just on semiconductor manufacturing so that they can be very capable in AI. They've spent more than 4 times what Congress passed for semiconductor manufacturing in the Chips and Science Act in 2022, 4 times. Their economy is less than 2/3 our time, and they're spending 4 times that amount of money. So I think that all of those technologies you were mentioning, quantum, actually the lead, I think Xi Jinping is correct in identifying AI as the spark plug that is going to allow either us or a communist regime in China and their friends to dominate in that space.
I appreciate it. We got a minute left, and can you expand or let me know what's China's access to compute through cloud systems?
Yeah, that's very, very important. That's one of the big loopholes that the last administration was working to address, and that I think there's still a lot of work to be done. And that is, it does us no good to prevent Beijing from importing massively powerful AI chips, the most advanced chips, if they can just go to Malaysia and train their AI and utilize AI in data centers, on our shores or in third countries. So we want trusted companies and partner governments to be the ones that are actually stewards of this computing capacity.
I think this really boils down to 2 issues. The first is, do we not let China get our technology? And I think the chairman has a bill that will very effectively deal with that. But then I think the second part of it is, how do we make sure our technology becomes the standard for the world and not Chinese? So there's sort of an offensive and a defensive. I would describe the chairman's sort of defensive, don't get our stuff, an offensive, which I've got a bill called the Full AI Stack Export Promotion Act that would do to try to push our stuff out there to become the global standard. Now, Mr. Pottinger, we saw an aggressive push by China to include AI full stack into their Belt and Road Initiative with the goal of making countries stick to the communist AI ecosystem. My bill that I've talked about would direct the State Department to identify American technologies and promote them to our allies and partners so they stay in the American AI ecosystem. Can you explain how aggressively you think it is, or how important it is that we aggressively and securely promote our AI technologies, and how that counters China?
Yep, I'm strongly in support of American technology dominating the full stack in most of the world, not in China per se, where we're not actually welcome, right? But when we talk about the tech stack, it's important to remember it's not just the hardware, the NVIDIA GPUs and so forth. In fact, the further up the stack you go, the more valuable it gets. NVIDIA, I mean, to use maybe a bad analogy, if NVIDIA GPUs are the rails for the railroad, all of the things that enables in terms of AI applications, the data centers, the incredible innovations that are made possible through creative use of AI, those are the locomotives on the track.
I put it this way: the hardware creates the capability, the software creates the creativity. I mean,
That's right, and more of the value is there. So I would rather sacrifice, giving China some railroads in service of us making sure that we dominate the locomotives and all the way back to the caboose. That should be American companies in not just in the United States and competing for major industrialized economies, but for the whole world, global South and in between.
So I have one other question. Again, you're talking about software. So to use an analogy of sort of social media, China was able to weaponize TikTok as a vehicle, not only just sort of we're not talking about military benefit. We're talking a lot here about them using our technology for military, but TikTok was weaponized as sort of a propaganding and brainwashing exercise. If China's stack becomes the global standard, is there the ability for them to kind of use that, what comes out of AI, to engage in the sort of nefarious activities using AI that they have done with sort of things like TikTok? And I have to let Mr. Feiner answer as well, given that he's the better version of me. So I'm fine, you're finer, so you both can answer.
I'll start. I don't accept the last characterization. We can take that one offline. Representative, I think honestly the best argument for the importance of the issue that you've put on the table, which is the full tech stack, including software, the best argument that is true, and that not only do we believe it's true, but that the Chinese, including their very top leadership, believes it's true, is that Xi Jinping himself launched a campaign inside China to purge American software. He called it Delete America, essentially. That is indicative of the fact that they believe that they have an unhealthy degree of dependency, and that they are going to try to do something to end that and to indigenize even this additional area of capability. So fully agree with your putting this issue on the table, with Matt's characterization that we have to be talking about the full tech stack, not just hardware, and I'll leave it at that.
Quickly.
Yeah, I associate myself with those remarks.
Okay. Yeah, look, what I would say is China sees us as the enemy. It's high time we do the same. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you.